Welcome to the 5-2 Diet podcast. All the tips and information you need to lose weight and feel great with intermittent fasting. I'm Kate Harrison from the 52dietbook.com. I've lost 31 pounds, that's 14 kilograms, and it's transformed how I eat and how I feel. I've written 4 books about 5-2, I run one of the largest 5-2 groups on the web, and I still fast every week. It's easy, flexible and free. This podcast will help you 5-2. Hello and welcome to the 5th 5-2 Diet podcast with me, Kate Harrison. And as it's podcast number 5, today we're going to focus on the other 5 days of your 5-2 or intermittent fasting diet, i.e. the non-fasting days. In a way, fast days are really easy. You've got a strict limit of around about 500 calories to eat if you're a woman, 600 if you're a man, and you're kind of planning in advance to make sure that there aren't any other distractions. Non-fasting days, well, that can be a little bit more complicated, right from what you call your non-fasting days, all the way through to what you can eat, whether you can have treats, whether you should be eating carbs or drinking alcohol, all the way through to whether eating too little on those days might affect the success of our diet. Today I'm going to talk about all of those things, and I'm also going to touch on some of the abbreviations that we use in forums and in discussion of what we're going to eat, including BMR, TDEE, WOE. I'm also going to answer 3 questions that have come in from our Facebook group. And remember, you can ask your own questions as well, either by posting in the Facebook group, if you're a member, which is facebook.com/groups/the52diet, or you can actually record your question. And I'll be using the first one today from Lynette. And the way to record is, it's very easy from either your phone or from your computer or your tablet. You just go to www.speakpipe, that's speak, then the word pipe, all one word, .com/the52diet. And as I say, we'll be hearing from Lynette later in the podcast. First of all, I'm going to read you a bit from my diary. Remember, I started this back in 2012 when I was doing the 5-2 for the first time, before there were any books on it or anything like that. I was just finding my way, really, and hopefully it shows that if I can do it as somebody who loves their food, you can too. So I'm going to read you relevantly today from my first non-fasting day. Kate's 5-2 Diary, Part 3, August 2012. My fitness pal keeps shouting at me. Mood, excited, curious, lucky. So, one fast down, the rest of my life to go. The day after my first fast day feels amazing, and I must admit, I go a bit OTT with the feasting, if you know what I mean. A Horizon show I watched said you could eat pretty much what you want on your non-diet days, so, well, I did behave myself till tea time, even cutting down the portion size of my normal yoghurt breakfast, but then it all went a bit, thank God it's Friday night, now let's eat everything in the fridge. I started well with that blueberry and yoghurt breakfast at just 104 calories. Then I had a panini at lunchtime. But at dinner, well, it's what I said about the fridge. Italian rosé wine, quite a lot, 300 calories. Millionaire shortbread dessert, 440 calories. Tortilla chips, 25 grams, 119 calories. Half a pot of edamame, pea and wasabi dip, that's a real favourite, 125 grams, 208 calories. Wholemeal roll, 155 calories. 100 grams of garlic mushrooms, 135 calories. Cherry tomatoes, 5, that's about 60 grams, 12 calories. Country Life butter, 10 grams, 69 calories. And one of those little graze boxes you get through the post, one of the portions of toffee apple, 68 calories. The total, 1,910 calories. I'm a bit ashamed to post all of that, but hey, I'm being honest. There's a dessert here that almost totaled my entire calorie consumption yesterday, plus nearly 2/3 of a bottle of wine. I am celebrating not being on a fast day, perhaps. And yet, I do need to be honest with myself. We all have our bad days, and it still came to only a little bit more than the 1876 calories I'd worked out is roughly what I need to stay the same weight per day. I am definitely not going to monitor all of my feast or non-fasting days, but it is almost reassuring to know that on this diet I can eat all of those pretty yummy things now and then and still potentially lose weight if I'm careful on fast days. Speaking of which, fast day 2 is a Saturday and I eat exactly the same as I ate on the first fast day, which I thought would be boring, but is actually pretty liberating. For example, what's wrong with sticking to a breakfast option that's tasty and you know will stop you feeling ravenous? Most of us eat the same breakfast every day. The school marm in my computer. The MyFitnessPal app and website is quite cross with me. On a fast day, I notice that it tells me off for eating too little, saying I might go into the dreaded starvation mode. Luckily, all I've read about the science says that one day's fasting at a time won't affect my metabolism. The strangest thing of all is that I've begun to like my fast days, even look forward to them. I feel it's a day off from thinking about food and also a bit of a rest for my body, which seems to fit in with what the Horizon Show experts said, that your body repairs itself while it's not running fast on protein. I've been experimenting with eating at different times too. With so much diabetes in my family, I'm interested in the effects of insulin, and it strikes me that part of the benefit of the intermittent fasting might be that your body isn't having to produce insulin all the time. So maybe trying to eat fewer meals a day, so you're not getting as many insulin spikes, is a good idea. Hunger? Bring it on. Just as strange to me is how hunger feels. I'd forgotten. Often what I'd mistaken for hunger is actually thirst or even boredom. But now that I let myself get hungry on fast days, it's not nearly as scary or overwhelming an experience as I feared. I'm aware that I am so lucky that I can avoid food for 1 or 2 days a week without worrying whether the food will be there when I want it to be. Eating less feels like a check-in, a reminder of what the right amount is to eat and how fortunate we are that there will be food when we're ready. It's really interesting reading back over what I wrote and what I was doing in those first few fast and non-fast days, because now I'm a bit of a veteran. I've been doing this, well, I've completed over 200 fasts now. It's a really part of my life. I wouldn't want it any other way. And I was looking and reading that list of all the things I ate on one of those first non-fasting days, and it seems like a lot, and yet if I put it in context, those are the kind of nibbles and bits of pieces it would be really easy to eat at a party or some other event without even thinking about it. And I think that's what 5-2 and intermittent fasting has done to me in general. It just made me more thoughtful, more conscious about what I eat on a fasting day and a non-fasting day. And before you panic, I am definitely not suggesting that you count up all your calories every non-fasting day. In fact, the opposite, and I'll go on to explain a little bit more about that later on. But first of all, I'm going to answer one of the questions because it's one of the big ones that people want to talk about every time when they talk about a non-fasting day. And it comes from Kate, another Kate on the 5-2 group, who says, is it true that you cannot count on normal days, eat freely and still have a good loss, i.e. 1 to 2 pounds per week? Especially if you only have 1 or 2 stone, that's kind of 14 to 28 pounds to lose. That's roughly what I had to lose, although I ended up losing about 2.5 stone. So in answer to the other Kate's question, the simple answer is yes. In principle, you can not count on normal days, eat pretty freely and still lose weight. And that is pretty much how I did it. So that day from my diary that you just heard there is exceptional. Generally, I didn't count. When I started out talking about 5-2 and then writing my first book, I was extremely insistent that people should avoid counting if at all possible. I have changed my view a little bit on that because I realise that a lot of people feel extra nervous about not counting. So especially if you have been dieting for years or decades, as many of us have before we get to 5-2, then you may feel that without a calorie limit, you could go a bit mad. Now, in practice, over time, I think that for most of us that doesn't happen. However, it can be useful to have a little bit of a guideline, and I will go into that a little bit later on what your guideline might be. There's a more complicated answer to this whole question, and it comes down to the idea of what eating normally really is. Let's be honest about it. If we are overweight, the chances are that we are eating more than our bodies need. So therefore, we're not eating normally as such. Now, there are all kinds of reasons for this. There are social reasons. One of the biggest reasons is that we are surrounded by delicious and or semi-addictive food that's been formulated and made to be as irresistible as possible. And therefore our bodies, which want us to survive, are encouraging us to eat all the time. And it's very hard to know what the right quantity is if we've been eating on the go and not very thoughtfully for many, many years. So it is important as part of your re-education, if you like, which is what I think 5-2 does, re-educates your appetite, to be conscious of the fact that you might be eating too much, and that's how you got into a situation of being overweight in the first place. However, we're also guilty, I think, of having funny ideas about food, partly as a result of having been on lots and lots of different diets over time. I know that I had been on so many different diets, and they also skew you away from what normal eating might be. So they make you very nitpicky about things. They might encourage you to completely wipe out a complete food group, carbs, for example, or to feel guilty about eating any kind of carbs. Guilt isn't normal either. And they may also encourage you to eat diet foods, the kind of formulated ones that you get that are normally pre-prepared and sell at a very high premium, that are often the opposite of nutritious. So if they've cut out fat, then they've probably upped the sugar content and vice versa. A lot of 5-2 generally, and I think over time, the reason that 5-2 works well for many of us is that it does help re-educate you back to normal. It helps you understand what it is that your body needs, and that's what I'm saying there in my diary, that if I understand what hunger feels like and how that is different from thirst or boredom, for example, then I'm much more likely to eat more in tune with what my body is asking for. 5-2 is different because it doesn't have any rules about what you can eat on your fasting days or non-fasting days, but I know that that can be a source of worry for people at first. So my opinion changed from when I first did it, and I began to realise that it was useful for many of us to have a guideline on what we might eat to maintain our weight. What does your body need each day? There are measurements that you can do, and I'm going to suggest that you can do if you want to find out more, that help you understand what it is that your body needs in order to maintain the same weight. And if you go to the 5-2dietbook.com/podcast5, I'm going to explain a lot of these terms there as well, so that you've got a handy reference. The first abbreviation I'll start with is BMR, and that stands for basal metabolic rate. And your basal metabolic rate is an estimate of what your body needs every day just to survive. So this is basal, really is a baseline. It's what you need to not lose weight, but to maintain the same weight, to keep your body ticking over without any extras, without exercise, pretty much without getting out of bed. It's just to preserve the vital functions like breathing, your heart beating, all of those kind of basic things. And your basal metabolic rate can be calculated on a calculator online, and it depends on various factors. So it depends on the weight that you're already carrying around with you, it depends on your gender, the level of fat versus muscle in your body, and your age. When you calculate it, it looks really quite low. So mine is around about 1,200 calories, I think, which sounds like nothing. And you think, oh my goodness, that sounds like a calorie controlled diet. But remember, this is just the baseline. The next calculation that factors in what you do on a daily basis, and this is the more relevant one, is the TDEE, and that is the total daily energy expenditure. What your body is spending by the time you take into account whether you get up, whether you work in a sedentary job or whether you work in a very physically active job. if you go for a run, or if your idea of relaxation is sitting in front of the telly with a glass of wine, and it tends to add quite a lot extra. So in my case, it comes to, now I've lost the weight, around about 1,800 calories per day. And that is what I need. If I weren't dieting in any other way, every day roughly I'd be looking to consume 1,800 calories to stay the same weight. So see the difference between the BMR, that's about 1,200, and 1,800, which is my TDEE. Now, what do you do, therefore, with your TDEE? It is a guideline. We know that some days we feel like eating less, and other days we're tempted by lots and lots of lovely things, and we may well end up eating more. I find the TDEE a useful figure to keep in the back of my mind, and so I know that on some days I'm going to overdo that, and some days I won't eat quite that much. Within my weekly limit, if you think about that, would be 7 times 1,800 calories. I'm also doing 1 or 2 fast days, and that is meaning that my overall consumption comes down. That is the way most of us lose weight on a fasting diet. We are eating in a normal way, and that's what we mean by normal, roughly around about our TDEE, what our body needs to keep our weight stable, but we're having a couple of days where we're eating a lot less. So if you're creating a calorie deficit, which you do from a fast day, that then means the body has to look to its own fat stores to give you the energy to do all the things you need to do. And by going into the fat stores, bingo, you're losing weight, and hopefully you're losing fat. That's what we want to do rather than lose muscle. The TDEE, therefore, is a useful figure to bear in mind. Okay, if we've worked this out, does that not mean that I have to calorie count every single day, in which case this is a normal diet? Well, absolutely not. And here are my reasons. Number 1, calorie counting every day is incredibly monotonous, as all of us who've tried doing calorie counting diaries know. If you're doing 5-2 and if you're doing it twice a week, then you are creating this deficit by eating only 500 calories on a fast day. You are eating perhaps 1,200 calories less than you might normally. A rough calculation is that to lose a pound of fat, it's going to take a deficit of around about 3,500 calories. So that means you should be losing at a rate of maybe 2 pounds every fortnight, or if you do 3 fast days, it might be a pound a week. That is a healthy, sustainable weight loss. Chances are you'll lose more in the first couple of weeks, but that's partly your body settling into it. And 1 to 2 pounds, which is what I was losing at, adds up to an awful lot of weight over a year. So if it's 1 pound a week, 52 pounds in a year, that's pretty phenomenal. If it's a little bit faster than that, 2 pounds a week, 104 pounds. That's a lot of weight to lose. Back to my reasons as to why on 5-2 you don't have to calorie count the whole time. Often we're restricting our eating times within those days and that we're not snacking constantly. So that also has benefits because it means that there are times when our body is effectively in that fasting state, and that encourages it then to dip into our fat stores to use up energy and to find the energy to keep us going. The easiest way for our body to fuel itself is with the food that we've just eaten, and particularly with carbohydrate foods, because they're very easily accessible for the body. It is harder work for it to dip into the fat stores, but fasting for a period of time does encourage the body to do that, and that's, after all, what we all want. The final couple of reasons. One is the halo effect, I call it, of the fast days. There's that increased awareness of what your body needs and the mindfulness, the knowledge of what the calories are in foods that comes from doing that very small scale counting on a fast day. That then kind of bleeds over or halos over into the other days. You notice that comment I made in my diary about the fact that one dessert that I ate on my non-fasting day was almost as much as my entire calorie allowance for the fast day that I'd had the day before. I think as I was eating it, I was thinking, is this really worth an entire fast day food? If it was, fantastic. If it wasn't, I would probably leave it the next time. And that brings me on to the final reason. It's the lack of guilt associated with non-fasting days. The fact we're not banning anything, including millionaire shortbread desserts, means that you're not having cravings. The body, when it knows something is banned, or the brain when it knows something is banned, is going to fixate on that. We've all had that happen. when you're suddenly saying, do you know what, anything goes on those non-fasting days, suddenly you're kind of like, well, chocolate, do I really want chocolate? I now found if I really want the chocolate, I will eat it in smaller quantities most of the time. But if I don't want it at that time, because it's not banned, because I know I could have it tomorrow if I wanted it, or the next day, I don't have that overwhelming craving. Which then is bringing me to question number 2. Actually, I had similar questions come from both Lynn and Susan. So Susan said, would you recommend eating low-fat diet or low-sugar, low-carb foods on non-fasting days? And Lynn is asking, is it best to try to avoid potatoes, pasta, rice as much as possible and keep to low-fat dairy products on a non-fasting day? And Lynn says that she knows that's her downfall, the carbohydrate-rich foods like potatoes, pasta and rice. I talked a little bit about this in podcast 4 as well, which was specifically about fast days. On a non-fasting day, I think you can eat a little of what you fancy, and I think that can include carbohydrates, including some of those simple carbohydrates that Lynn mentions, which include the potatoes, the white pasta and the white long grain rice. So those are things that often on diets you're told are a terrible thing to do. There's a whole set of debates we can go into about carbohydrates. As I say, I touched on it a little bit in the last podcast. I will do one specifically about food groups in the future. However, I think it's important to realise that simple carbohydrates like bread, like rice, like pasta are comforting, and they're cheap and they're easy. I would say that to expect you to avoid them for the rest of your life on non-fasting days, for most of us who don't have iron willpower, is unrealistic. What I do think you can do is to try to look at creating balanced meals. So if you are going to have potatoes, if you are going to have pasta and rice, perhaps think a little bit over time, not immediately, about shifting the portion size and the portion proportions. So if you used to have an awful lot of pasta and only a bit of sauce, if you just cut down your pasta size, say by 25 grams or a little bit less, and have more sauce, say with more vegetables in it, a little bit more protein on the top, some chicken or some cheese or whatever it is, our stomach and our body processes different food groups, that's carbohydrates, fats and proteins, at slightly different rates. If you have one meal that consists mainly of one of those food groups, and this is particularly the case with carbohydrates, you're going to digest very quickly and you're going to feel hungry much sooner than you would if you had a meal that consisted of protein and fat as well as the carbs. Ask yourself, okay, can I have one fewer potato, a little bit less rice, some less pasta, and up the content of protein and fat just that little bit so I've got a more balanced meal? Then there was a big question about lower fat dairy products. In a lot of cases, and this is where we've run into trouble over the years, if you have lower fat foods, especially the diet type foods that are promoted, they're compensating for the reduction in fat, for removing fat by adding other things. Now that might be stuff that you wouldn't recognise, weird ingredients, sort of stabilisers and fillers and odd stuff, chemical stuff that your granny, if she read the label, would not understand, or it might be sugar. An awful lot of those lower fat diet foods that we've had over the years have just pumped in the sugar because we miss the taste of fat. It's satisfying to us. It actually stops us feeling hungry for quite a lot longer. So they put the sugar in there to make it taste more palatable. I would say that on a non-fasting day, choose full fat dairy products. You don't have to be quite as neurotic about fat as you might have thought. So some lovely full-fat Greek yogurt with some nice fruit, berries preferably, that you've got out of the freezer or even picked yourself is going to be much better for you and is going to keep you fuller for longer than a diet yogurt packed with weird stuff. So overall, I would say on a non-fasting day, it's about being a little bit mindful, but it's certainly not about banning any food group. If I'm on holiday or if there's been lots of celebrations, we're in January now, so Christmas was a bit more indulgent than my normal time, what I'll do as somebody who now maintains on fasting, I'll go back up to 2 fasts in a week rather than 1, and then any little bit of excess weight will go. Far better than being neurotic about it. And in fact, in next week's podcast, I'm going to be talking a lot more about that feast days and holidays and how to fit 5-2 in with your life. I mentioned feast days here, and that's one other thing I did want to mention today before I go on to the final question coming in from one of our dieters. When I wrote the first 5-2 book, I talked about the non-fasting days as being feast days, and here was my logic for this. I felt that anything you ate on a day after a fast day felt like a feast, and I like that word. I like the idea of it being a celebration of delicious foods, and I think, that a plate of fantastic fresh steamed broccoli with some lemon on top and some olive oil, that can taste like a feast to me every bit as a big slice of chocolate cake. Some people don't like that. I realised over time that feast day for some people suggests really going over the top and suggests giving you license to eat way, way too much. So as a result of that, I have said to people, call the non-fasting days whatever you like. Non-fasting is the most uncontroversial term. You could call them a normal day. You could call them a healthy day. You could call them a feast day. You know what? You can call them anything you like. And I think that's another great thing about 5-2, about the democracy of it, the fact we're all inventing our own versions. Get the hang of the basic version, use your own words, and see what suits you the best. My final question today comes from Lynette, who did phone speakpipe.com on her computer, speakpipe.com/the 52 diet, and she left her question, which we'll listen to now.
Hello, my name is Lynette and I'm from Falkirk in Scotland. I've just started to do the 5-2 and my question is, on non-fast days, how important is it for you to use your full daily allowance?
Thanks, Lynette, and that's a really interesting question. The full daily allowance that she's talking about, that is therefore your TDEE that I was talking about before, your total daily energy expenditure, which is what we think the body needs in order to keep going, not lose any weight. I think the odd day when you don't eat up to your TDEE is not a big deal. As I've said to you before, our appetite naturally ebbs and flows. It might be the weather, it might be the time of the month if you're a woman, it might be because there are lots more temptations on one day and on another you've just got some delicious fresh veg in the house and you want to eat that. Lots of us actually underestimate what we're eating. If you've ever watched a programme in the UK, there's a programme called Secret Eaters where they record what people eat and they have hidden cameras in the house and so on, and people are normally absolutely amazed when they realise the extra snacks that they're eating that they forgot about it. They say, I don't know why I keep putting on weight, and then they show them the footage where they're, sneaking a naan bread off their partner's plate, and that is why they're putting on weight. But if you can work in positive targets, so instead of thinking about your exact calorie count, your TDEE, instead you're thinking, right, okay, today is the day I'm definitely going to have 5 portions of vegetables. In fact, never mind 5, I'm blowing that out of water, I'm having 7. You're probably going to fill up really quite quickly by having that kind of positive goal for yourself. Another one might be eat the colours of the rainbow today. I'm going to eat foods which are naturally as many different colours on my plate as I possibly can. All of this comes down to listening to your body and learning to listen to your body. If you do think that you're not quite eating enough, then I recommend a whole range of things, including nuts. Nuts are just superfoods. They really are. They're really delicious, easy to eat, energy dense and full of good oils, good fats. There's a lot of evidence that eating a number of nuts each day will help protect the heart, and people tend to live longer if they eat nuts. So almonds, Brazil nuts, walnuts, even delicious macadamias, which I cannot resist, they will do you good. Another thing is oil. Spreading some nice oil on a salad, on cooked vegetables will up the calories, but it will also generally be good for you. I think there's one final factor here, and it is my top bit of advice, I guess, on a non-fasting day for keeping a healthy diet but also making better habits, and that is to cut out as much snacking as possible. Snacking and the encouragement of snacking, if I'm honest, has probably been one of the greatest disservices that we've been done by nutrition experts and by food manufacturers over the years. The idea that if we miss meals for any length of time, if we skip and if we allow ourselves to get a little bit hungry, we're doing something terribly damaging. There are a few people who've got blood sugar issues, some diabetics, who really shouldn't allow themselves to let their blood sugar drop. But for most of us, Do you know what? Fast days teach us that we can just keep going, and that actually, the longer you leave it, you're going to enjoy that dinner all the more. I'm definitely a reformed snacker, I have to tell you, with a few exceptions. And this is the joy of 5-2 and the best way to end the podcast, because if there's a fantastic plate of smelly cheese or a really lovely looking slice of cake or cookie or something like that, do you know what? I'll think about it, ask myself if I really want it, and if it's a non-fasting day, I'll go right ahead and enjoy every single bite. That's it for today. 3 quick things before I go. I promised I would tell you what 2 other initials stood for, WOE or WOL. WOE looks like woe on the page, but it actually means way of eating or way of life, which is what a lot of people use as a phrase if they don't want to use the word diet because it's got negative connotations. The second thing before I go is next week we're going to be talking about treats, celebrations, holidays, and how to fit 5-2 in around that. So if you've got any questions, you can get in touch. And finally, celebrations. I am celebrating today because I have an ebook out, one of my novels, because as well as writing about diets, I write fiction. It's called A Batch Made in Heaven. It's about love and London and bakeries, because that's a particular interest of mine, baking. So I will end the plug there, but it's available until January the 22nd for a very cheap 99 pence. Goes up only a little bit after that date if you want to know a little bit about my other creative life. That's it. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you can join me again next time. For more free tips, recipes and information, visit the5-2dietbook.com. Follow me on Twitter at the52diet, or download free samples of any of the books online at Amazon. Join in the lifestyle change everyone's talking about.